What made New York, Atlanta, Miami, and LA such big centers of the media and entertainment sectors in the US? And the biggest realization was we probably need about 10 million new talent in this sector over the next 20 years. That's the kind of number we are talking about. We need 10 million new people working in various components of the industry to really get ourselves into the space Ashish talks about, Dhruv, Rajesh talked about, Vijay talked about. It's so important to start realizing that it will be the creation of that IP Ashish mentioned. It will be creating the ecosystem that Bangalore has done for services in IT, or what Silicon Valley has done for creating value out of IT in various forms. That is required for us to really take shape or make shape out of media and entertainment globally. And I think when you see a show like Balika Vadhu as being #1 dubbed in Kazakhstan, it's the #1 show in Kazakhstan, guys. Or you see the fact that Indian television content earned $300 million in exports last year. Or you see films like some of the top 3 or 4 films, including Bhag Milka Bhag, make more than $30 million in its first run in North America. When you start to see those numbers add up, then you see the opportunity for India going global and for India to do what Rajesh talked about, which is creating content for our country on gaming platforms that we would adore playing with, and not look at Spider-Man or look at FIFA 2014. We probably want to play cricket like the rest of the world wants to play FIFA 2014. It's the coming together of all this and what each state should figure out it ought to focus on. It can't do everything. It can't do creation, plus distribution, plus SATCOM, plus exhibition, plus talent. It won't be able to do it right. You've got to figure out which components of this ecosystem you're going to focus on as a state, you're going to promulgate as a state, you're going to create value as a state to then provide that national ecosystem we need to go global in media and entertainment.
Thank you very much. So I think this, across the various opinions that we've had today, the one thing that, 2 or 3 things emerging is that it's not a unidimensional thing of services as an extension of services into new segments, be animation, gaming, and visual effects. They are more, they're much more than that. This is about content, this is about IP, this is about creativity, and as such, these industries need to be nurtured in a more holistic manner than just as, additional job creators. Because if it is done so, then these jobs would go to the next country which is leaner, meaner, hungrier. I mean, we have seen that already with some jobs which have gone in the gaming industry from India to Vietnam because somebody found Vietnam was cheaper. But on the other hand, if the Indian market takes off with the local consumption of content for local content, jobs won't go away. Jobs will get created because you have to use the local creators to create the local content. You cannot have Americans and the Russians coming to create Indian content. You'll have to have Indians doing so. I wanted to have some little detailing. 2 questions really to do with the Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. Biren, as you see the industry driving, is a unique model, the first time in India. How do you see the implementation of the policy so far, and very briefly, and how do you see the next 2 to 3 years? And what do you think will be achieved at a holistic level than just with creating more jobs from a services perspective?
The experience of the last couple of years is very, very relevant, and I think probably also useful for other people not to go through the same learning curve. Uh, if I was to be perfectly fair to the process, we have recommended many things in haste, and when the onus comes back to the industry to implement them, because all of us are so busy with our day jobs, execution is pretty hellish. So I think, in what we want to achieve next, in the next round of the policy, we want to make sure that the things that we put in can have a much wider engagement. Because you don't want it to be left to 5, 10, 15, 50 people to execute something, which actually requires to go to tier 2, tier 3 cities. It requires to, have a completely new dynamic. And there's a lot of concept selling involved here, because people come from existing silos of where they are. So to give you a flavor of what I'm talking about, when you go out to say that you, sir, are a college of fine arts, and we want to come and take you into the digital world, that interaction is more difficult than it would ordinarily seem. And although we bring both know-how, passion, and money, it is not easy for us to make that communication very easy, because that person is used to doing something in his or her own way. So if I was to zoom out again, I think we are far better equipped now amongst the wider team at the association, and all associations, I think FICCI and EBI and everybody else. I think we are now aiming towards what is practical and what can catch fire and become a revolution more easily than all the first statements that we had made, saying we want this and we want this and we want this. So I think that's the first lesson that is really important to learn. We've also taken faculty to have the right tools, to have the right curriculum, has not resulted in the amount of effort that has gone into that in 10 years is phenomenal. So, the difficult thing we're doing, for example, is to set up a Train the Trainer Institute. We've already set it up. We've worked very closely with the government. We've got our reviews coming up now. We have to make sure that the next milestones are achieved. We are yet to draw down our further tranches of money from the first money is already deployed. And we are finding that in order to get all of this going is a huge task. It is as difficult a task as we have in running our own companies. And none of us in this sector have associations that actually can run like businesses. So we're trying to balance that task, spending all of our Saturdays, spending time and getting people together. So I would say, the next steps and the advice to people, and we had the Deputy Chief Minister of Punjab came here to my office last week, 2 weeks back. We've had the West Bengal people coming, and everyone wants to do the same thing that everybody else is doing. And if I was joking with somebody when they came, that if we had made spelling mistakes in our policy, the spelling mistakes would have come in those policies
Yes, indeed,
as well.
indeed.
So
Starting from Maharashtra.
So my point is that there is a tremendous need, and although you called these two fine gentlemen competitors, which is good, I think the maturity in any industry, and it happens in all other industries everywhere else in the world. If you look at broadcasting in the US compared to broadcasting in India, the maturity is far older. So people learn when to compete and when to collaborate. And I think that same model applies to states. There are things that can be done in Goa versus Karnataka versus AP versus Maharashtra that can be quite different from each other, but could put together a very cohesive fabric of what everybody wants to use, and people might use them in different places.
Well, for certainly there is one thing that all the states can do to work together, because there are aspects that only the center can do, which the states cannot do. There is taxation, there is customs duties, there are SEZ policies, and to the point that the states are now beginning to invest big, serious amount of resources, the talent of people from their teams in the bureaucracy to the monies that is being plowed in. It takes two to tango. You need the center. So one of the things that we know as industry, our voices are not heard as well enough as it should be. But if we had these state governments who are now rolling out these policies come together and tell the center that if you do your bit, then we could do, our policies would find much more success. Because when companies look at the investment criteria and look at the investment environment, some of those things which are at the central level have a very, very big role to play. And that could, if those are sorted out by the good offices of four or five chief ministers coming together and writing a note together, that would go a very long way in helping the industry overall.
And it has happened before. I go back to 10 years when, FICCI and CII, and you were part of the committee of both. We had to go state by state because entertainment tax is a local issue. And for those of you who recall, the entertainment tax was at an average about double what it is today across the whole country. And so we had to take advisories from INB, for example, and then we had to go and meet with several states across the country to say that, by bringing down the overall level of taxation, you will get much more legitimate income and much more, proper declaration of those things. So there are these kinds of things which need to be done at a state level on a more coordinated basis. But I think the important thing is that when the states are beginning to spend their initial monies on execution, unlike in the case of large mature industries, I think we also need to now recommend that besides the money for the initiative, there should be also some money for administering and executing that initiative. So, for example, you need to build a mini version of a FICCI or a CII at the state level in order to help the industry people who can give that much time and no more. And I think everybody is doing a great job. But I think execution is now becoming a new technology that we have to learn in AVGC as well.
Right.
I just want to add to what Viren had to say. It's so important to get the funnel right. There are issues that need to be handled at the national level. There are issues that need to be handled at the state level. And there are collaborative issues that Viren so well talked about that need to be chalked out. I think the opportunity for India Inc. is just extraordinary. If we don't do it right, we will end up creating so many inefficiencies and falter. And we'll have repeated what happened, for example, in Karnataka, in West Bengal 7 years later, and just wasted energy in doing so. So I think he's so right.
As an
Creating that
example,
funnel.
we should learn from the lessons of Kinfra and not
Correct.
repeat those mistakes.
Exactly.
Shaukat, I wanted to know from you.
But before you come for that question, whatever, I just want to clarify one thing on the policy side. See, as far as the policy making is concerned, what we have done is, we just did not copy it. We studied.
You did run the spell check.
Yeah.
But,
We studied the policies of some of the Indian states which has come up with animation policy. Then we made a comparative statement of some of the major animation hubs worldwide, including Seoul, Dubai, UK, Amsterdam, all those. We personally visited these places. We took information from the hubs there, the key stakeholders there. Then we came back. We divided the whole thing into two issues. One is a policy issue, one is an infrastructure issue. Now on the policy issue, we definitely had some cues from Karnataka. Then on that, Karnataka was a kind of foundation for us. And on that, we made a kind of tower basing on the kind of incentives which other governments worldwide, they give it. We have, if you see our draft policy, the reason which I'm not talking much on that is it's still a draft because it needs a political clearance. Cabinet has to sit, and cabinet maybe if they get some free time from Telangana and other issues, they would any day they would come and clear that. So if you see our draft policy, it has almost 17 cash incentives, and then we have administrative incentives. So this is on the policy side. And one of the other issue which Biren was mentioning about creation of clusters, that was again a kind of year of a larger vision. We saw Dubai Media City, we saw Manchester, Media City UK, Manchester, then we went to Dutch Game Gardens. Then we saw a similar initiative in Seoul, Toronto and Montreal. We studied all the model, our consultants were traveling with us, then our architectural consultants, they were traveling with us. They literally video filmed it. And we came back, we did all the, we joined all the clippings together. Then we decided yes, we need to come with a dedicated cluster. Like what we are doing it for electronic manufacturing cluster. Similar model, we are coming up with something called a game city. GAM is Gaming, Animation, Media, Entertainment. This is a pure model of something, a replica of something what is there in Toronto or Montreal and Manchester. So this is going to be a cluster initiative where we are going to have about 8 lakh SFT built up space. Then we'll have individual studios, and then space for academic institution, which we are talking with Manchester.
So how is this model going to work, the incubator model that you have? Because the interesting thing I read in the couple of news releases that came out in this was that you have emphasized the support for small companies.
Yes.
And it's an interesting point that you make because when you take the gaming industry, we have about 175 game developers in India today. 150 of them are less than 20 people in size, and possibly 100 of them are less than 10 people in size. So there is an interesting match to something that you're proposing to at least to the games industry today. There's a lot of independent developers. So how could they potentially benefit from your?
You're
game
right.
study?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, these are normally independent developers who walks in with a laptop and start doing games. See, we have seen this in Amsterdam. We went to a place called Dutch Game Gardens. That was like, I mean, a kind of interest that has given us. Our whole 8 lakh SFT building is divided in such a way that we'll have about 3 lakh incubation space for all these micro SMEs, SMEs, and mid-scale companies. For the big ones, we are giving them land, a complete year. So these would be a kind of incubation, the incubation space would be, they just need to get in their basic equipment. One of the policy initiative is we are going to give them the software license
Oh,
for free.
That's
We are
fantastic.
going to give them internet bandwidth for free, and many things. I mean, I just don't want to talk much about it because it's still a draft. So the moment, I mean, it gets cleared, then.
So I look forward to looking at your policy in greater detail. I think we are kind of running out of time. I wanted to summarize. It's clearly.
Just add to what,
Sure.
there's something that policymakers need to recognize. The entire entertainment industry coming out of the US employs 1.4 million people and generates over $1 trillion in revenue annually. Silicon Valley is a different game. 7 million people generate $6 trillion in market cap. Okay? Totally different games. And I think it's so important to recognize this in trying to build what we need.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. It's a great point to make towards the end of this conversation because the digital industries and with everything else converging, this is not about how many jobs we will create as the most important metric to decide whether we support these industries or not. This is about far more value added, far more value, far up the value chain. And I think these policies, the end of the day, I think there was a very famous book that was once written by, which talked about Silicon Valley versus Highway 101 and which one, why did Silicon Valley become Silicon Valley and why did Highway 101 not become the Silicon Valley? Because at one point they were both at the same point. I think one lacked the soul and the other one had it. So the soul is of people and the right kind of people and the right kind of circumstances and ambience for such people to come together. I think that is an extremely important thing to recognize as we move forward. It may not matter when we are still creating the incentives for creating a 1,000-person shop for doing mocap cleanup, but I think as we move forward towards creating the big brands and the big IPs, I think that soul is going to play a very big role. And I think whoever gets that right would be creating that big hub.
One critical factor for the state policies is, when you say television or say mobile or say, the broadcasting, it's kind of gets left out because it's all going into the central issues rather than the state issues. The key here is that we are talking about the content issues for all these frameworks that are centrally controlled. So the thing is, you cannot have a policy in isolation saying that, okay, this is in my purview and this is not in my purview. You need to look at a holistic picture while you make the policy. Yeah, that's why it says the funnel has to be.
So holistic policies, recognizing the overall the gamut of opportunity, and I think we have very knowledgeable and intelligent people who are working on it. So I think with that I'd like to close this panel, and thank you very much for this engaging conversation. If there are any questions, one or two questions that we could take.
My question is for Mr. Dhiren Ghosh. I'm an IT lawyer and we represent a lot of IT companies both in India and abroad. And whenever we have conversations with our clients, it's always great to hear them say that, you know, the second largest R&D is now in India, a third largest R&D is now in India. But when we dig a little deeper, we realize that there's not much IP coming out of this R&D, departments. Leaving aside pharma. Pharma is doing extremely well. But on the IT side, for instance, you know, and it's interesting that one of the reasons given